Welcome to the Liberty Restoration Information Show. Let's start with a word of prayer, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance and our national anthem. Heavenly Father, we the people, on behalf of the United States of America, come to you this day as our nation's founding fathers did so many years ago. We humbly ask for your guidance and wisdom so that we the people, with your leadership, may restore America to the country you guided our forefathers to establish. We also humbly ask that you help unite all Americans in this effort so that all may once again enjoy the rights you blessed us with and left in our safekeeping. Forgive us, Lord, for turning away from you and squandering our liberty, for we know that by restoring you to your place on high in this nation, we will never again forget that it is you, Father, from whom our liberty flows. Help us restore it, O Father, for your glory. Amen. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight for the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the hope of the brave.
Welcome each and every one of you out there listening to the Liberty Restoration Information Show. My name is Ernest Lee, co-chairman and spokesperson for the Liberty Restoration Committee. I hope you're having a great Saturday, and I want to say welcome to all you folks that are listening for the first time. Seems like every week our audience grows, the word spreads, and we are closer and closer to restoring our constitutional republic to its original intent, not some subverted version, but the original intent of the framers, and keeping them there. And the secrets in doing all this, there are really no secrets at all. They're available at thelibertypledge.com. Everything is there. Every tool you need to participate in the restoration of our Constitution is provided for you by the Liberty Restoration Committee, the Constitutional Gurus, myself, and as always, my lovely and talented, outspoken, and outstanding in his field. Maybe he's inside the house today. Maybe he's not outstanding in his field. It would be Jeremy Deeter from Columbus, Ohio. Mr. Deeter, welcome, and tell folks where they can catch you during the week, sir.
I appreciate that. And yeah, actually, you caught me in the field. I'm in the field. That's weird. I don't know how you knew that. You guys can catch me Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday on truthfrequencyradio.com, 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on a show called Evolution. And then on the weekends we're here. So we've gotten a lot of good crossover, and appreciate everyone joining us tonight.
Yeah, Jeremy had me on, Thursday, as a matter of fact, because he allowed me to come on his program
and promo our guest tonight. It'll be coming up here in just a couple of minutes. Gentleman's name is Scott Kesterson. He's with a PAC, a political action committee called Kilroy Rising. Now, I'm not going to try and steal any of Scott's thunder as far as describing his group, the makeup of his group, or what his group is about. We're going to have him with us. As a matter of fact, he's listening right now and just waiting for me to shut up to give him a chance to talk. And Scott, we'll get to you in just a minute. Now, I want to take, like I say, and welcome everybody, your first-time listeners. Listen close, because the title of the show tells you what the show is about. It's the Liberty Restoration Information Show. We go into a little more depth, a little more detail, and we take callers, and I also want all of you that are standing ready and waiting to participate to be sure and listen closely to everything Scott tells you. He and I made a connection this past week, and I think it's going to be a connection that works to, we all want the same thing, right? We want our country back. We want to stop the corruption in government. We want it reversed. We want it reined in. And we want our Constitution restored. We want our constitutional republic restored to its original intent. Now, there's lots of different things out there. And I'm going to do something that normally I don't do. I'm not bashing any individual or actually any group, but I want to refer those of you either to a 3-part series on YouTube by Chris Ann Hall or to Chris Ann Hall's book, Sovereign Duty, where she discusses the Article 5 Convention of States. Now, those of you, some of you don't know this, but back at its inception, I was the national grassroots ambassador for the Convention of States Project. I also applauded Mark Levin's book, The Liberty Amendments, and I'd been talking for about 10 years about a COS, Convention of States. Well, 10 years ago, it might have done us some good if we'd been able to have one. But things have now reached the point, and Chris Ann's information and information that's available from other sources, number one, the Congressional Research Service reports, tells you exactly what Congress thinks and how they anticipate basically being able to head off any attempt there ever will be for an Article 5 Convention of States. And Chris Ann goes into great detail. And I want to take a moment or two and reach out to different state organizations already. Several of the state organizations of the COS project in Kansas, they've changed gears. They've joined the LRC because you don't have to wonder what you're going to get with the LRC. It's all there for you in black and white, or in this case, at thelibertypledge.com. If you look at something called the People's Constitution for America, it's color-coded. You've got, it's in black, well, obviously in white background, but it's in black ink. 90% of the content straight from our Constitution. Then there is blue, bright blue coloring. That lets you know any language, word, or even a capitalization that has either been changed, altered, or added. And I challenge each and every one of you to look at it. Those of you that knee-jerk and say, wait a minute, this guy's talking about a new Constitution. Yeah, I am. The legal, lawful, constitutional way, with the precedent set the same way we went from the Articles of Confederation, our first Constitution, to our present-day Constitution. The People's Constitution will follow this same path and same method, working through the state legislative bodies to ratify this document and make it the supreme law of the land. But, you look through it, there won't be, I challenge anybody to find a single right or liberty of the people that's harmed, or the sovereignty of the states being harmed or short-circuited. You won't find it. You won't find it because it doesn't exist. As a matter of fact, it restores the sovereignty of each and every independent nation-state, and it protects the rights, the liberty, and the property of we, the people, just the way our framers intended. So, I've said all those things, and once again, that is at thelibertypledge.com. If you, Scott, would unmute, and Miss Producer in the background, if you by chance muted him, unmute him as well. Scott Kesterson, welcome aboard, sir. Kilroy Rising. Tell us about your organization.
Oh, thank you very much for having me on tonight. I really appreciate it. So I just pulled up your People's Constitution and started to just scroll through it. So do you want me to start with a little bit about Kilroy Rising? Is that where we want to start tonight?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, please. Tell us about the organization, when it was formed, what you stand for, what your membership is like, and the fact that you just made Breitbart and some other major news sources that actually pretty much tell, well, they try and make it as factual as possible. But you guys just made the national news because you sent a little letter to Donald Trump, didn't you?
Yes, we did indeed. So, all right. So back in May, let me back up just a second. A little context. I mean, myself, I am not from the traditional special operations pipeline, and I've worked with the special operations community for quite a number of years. I spent 3.5 years in Afghanistan, and my main focus was doing the sort of information side of the war that supported these guys on the ground. When this election started, like most of us, we sat quietly on the side and hoping for the best, but it's really not, even in a sense of whatever capacity for veterans, it's very typical for a side to sit and to hold our line because we don't typically like to jump in the middle of politics. But the more that we started to look at this, and me in particular, as I started to look at this election, what really became clear is that we're not really facing what we would call an election. I mean, by all normal definitions, it's an election because we're voting. We're going through a process of our electoral process. We have two candidates now in the bipolar type of system that we have. But if you really look deep under the cover, by all definition, what we're facing right now is an insurgency. And we're facing the culmination of 30 to 40 years of an insurgency that's building, which changes the paradigm considerably of how we consider this year. Taking candidates aside for just a second, we really are faced with two primary choices. And it's ironic because these are the choices that we've fought to protect against for so long. Our one choice is something that's being represented by one candidate, i.e. Hillary Clinton, which is being driven towards the concept of a globalization and a total loss of national sovereignty. And on the other candidate side, Donald J. Trump, you have the push for retaining national sovereignty, reinforcing our borders, bringing jobs back to the country, and reestablishing national unity and national pride. Those value structures are what we've represented for years, and that's what the military stands and fights for. And so when you start to break the election down into those two categories, candidates really cease to exist, and what we are facing now is a critical decision of what the shape and future of the United States will be. So in May, I made the decision to stand up a political action committee. And after doing some research and really deciding how we wanted to bridge our past and what the military line has represented and the future direction of what I felt needed to be a place to go, I looked back at one of the very important characters, which ironically today we'd probably call it a meme, but it was really a cultural symbol of it was in World War II, and it was Kilroy Was Here. And to really dig into that, we really again come to appreciate just how important of a cultural symbol that was. It started out from the best of history that we can find. It started out from a dock worker on the East Coast that was marking it on crates, sending it over to the Hitler Germany before we entered the war, just to let him know that it's kind of a slap in the face to say, we know we're here, we're everywhere. That got picked up as soldiers moved through Europe, and it also got picked up by the OSS, which was the original precursor to today's special operations and special forces. And so I modernized the logo a bit, and I created the logo based on Kilroy, and I stood up the PAC called Kilroy Rising to represent the return of that sort of spirit in America. And over since May, we've been quietly organizing and building our teams across the country. We're building, the idea of Kilroy is to use the principles within special operations that are so good and use it for the purposes in the veterans community of special operations to mobilize the vote and mobilize veterans to become active in a process to effectively save the nation. And this is a very important statement because staying away from the militant point of view of the concept of enemies, foreign and domestic, where that is one of the principles that we swear to when we sign, to protect the United States from enemies, foreign and domestic. We have an opportunity right now, it's a critical opportunity to use the vote as a powerful tool to reclaim and protect the nation. And the best people to mobilize that have a deep-seated value structure within that are the veterans. And the best way to organize that sort of movement across the country are to use America's finest, which are the special operators. These guys have been trained to set up small indigenous operations. They've been designed to maintain the highest order of ethics as they move and integrity, and to keep focused on a singular mission, which is to commit to getting people involved so that there is an active voting process and highly represented. Now, the fact that we've now taken a position, because when this PAC first started, it wasn't taking a position for either candidate. And in fact, there was too many candidates. Right.
Scott, let me jump in just a second here, because you've already made several amazing points. Number one, that you've got this is a political action committee comprised of people that were considered the elite in the military, and guys that are specially trained and special operations and things such as this, which, absolutely admirable. And now you guys have made a statement, but as you had said, you didn't set out to set up the PAC to endorse a particular candidate. That wasn't the purpose of Kilroy Rising. That wasn't the purpose at all. And all of the things. By the way, I watched I call them black and white stick figure, a little video about a minute and a half long about Kilroy Rising and about some of the principles that you guys are pushing and representing. Could you take a minute and go back to just the crux, and then go into the what led up to the letter of endorsement and what kind of impact that seems to have with the veterans all across the country? And Mr. Deeter, I will tell you, sir, that once he answers that question, when you feel the time is right, you jump in with a question, please, sir.
Okay, gladly. So, really, that's a very critical point, because when this PAC was launched, and I funded this PAC completely out of my own pocket to get this PAC up and going on the principle that veterans had a role here that was extremely important, based on maintaining free elections, safe elections, and pushing for, obviously, the maintenance of national sovereignty. And with that, there were four critical principles we used: strong borders, American jobs, a unified America, and making America strong again. So those are very similar principles.
I don't mean to interrupt you again, but you're in direct opposition to a global government, or a one world government, or a new world order. You stand in direct opposition to that. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Okay, so I think that's, here, we're going to have to get into this either way, so let's get into this right now, because I think there's fundamentally something that people need to understand about this concept of open border and one world government. This administration has set up a set of precedents that we can kill American citizens as long as they're outside the United States if we determine them to be a threat without due process. Now,
well, don't forget Lavoy Finicum. That occurred inside the United States. Go right ahead, sir. I'm sorry, Scott.
Okay,
I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you.
All right, I'm going to stay focused on military operations. Okay, and this is very important.
Go ahead.
So, you keep the optic on this from the community of the military, because it's very, very important. From the community of the military, we have established a precedent now that we can kill American citizens abroad if we determine them to be a threat to national security, and we can do so without due process. Now, there exists a line that separates that from domestic operations, meaning that the military can't operate domestically doing those sorts of things, and that line is determined by something called posse comitatus. Now, posse comitatus is that line that prevents federalized troops without special presidential authority from operating within domestic space, within the domestic territory of the United States. That means the states of the United States or its territories, meaning that there is a civilian force, i.e. police, that work on those local spaces. And the only group that has the crossover of that line is the National Guard, and the National Guard is intended so that it is a local. It gets its roots, as we all know, from the state militias. When you talk about erasing the border and creating a borderless world, the military is now placed in a position where posse comitatus can be removed. It effectively disappears, so that the idea of lethal action can actually now become a matter of course within military operations. Now, if you talk to military planners, they'll tell you that's not going to be possible. I'm going to tell you that it can be, because the minute that you don't have a border, the question you have to ask is, what is it that you're actually defending? And this was a question that we started to pose to special operations members right from the very beginning. And that question was one that really took hold, because it was an eye-opener. It was a place to start to realize that this concept of when there's military strategists dealing with a multipolar world and a plural border situation, What they're not accounting for is that very, very critical safety mechanism that we have in the check and balance of authority, which is called posse comitatus. And once that goes away, we now have a free-for-all for depending, and we're completely relying on the judgment and intent of an elected political side of the government to decide what will and won't happen in lethal action. And that's a completely different world than we're currently living in now. For some perspectives, maybe not as extreme as I'm saying, but I will guarantee you that if we see that sort of a world, the borderless world suddenly becomes where there's no limit of what can happen domestically. That defeats a lot of the entire intent of what the military stands for. And when you're fighting to keep enemies out and you suddenly take the border and you erase it, you're saying let enemies in regardless. This creates a whole new dynamic in the way we see our world. And quite frankly, that's not what I stand for. And I will tell you that as we move forward in this conversation further, you will see that it's not what others stand for as well. So, as I stated in the beginning, Kilroy was initially started as a PAC, non-politically aligned for a candidate. And in fact, we still have that sort of deeper attitude because I don't really care whether if the person holds the values of trying to protect the sovereignty of the United States, I don't care if they're an independent. I don't care if they're a libertarian. I don't care if they're a Democrat. I don't care if they're a Republican. Those are tags that we put on them to allow for political powers to gain position on the market space of politics. But the reality is what we are talking about in principle form are strong borders, a sovereign United States. We're talking about maintaining the things that allow that to happen, which are jobs for Americans and enhancing American unity, and which is under a single flag and under the authority of a God.
I appreciate you telling everybody the real focus of what Kilroy Rising is, because I think you made it abundantly clear. My name is Jeremy, by the way, and
hey, Jeremy, how you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. I appreciate you asking. I want to make sure that I wasn't researching two different Scott Kestersons on the internet. So I'm going to go through some information, and if this isn't you, if it's not you, which would be hard to believe at this point, let me know. You were blogging, and then you decided to become a documentarian.
Correct.
This led you to being the very first civilian journalist embedded with the military. That was through a program the military had. Yep. And that put you with the historic 41st Infantry Brigade Combat Team out of Oregon, a.k.a. the Jungleers. And you ended up staying for that entire tour. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. I won an Emmy for that work at the end of 2007, or the spring of 2007.
Yeah, you got an Emmy for the media short.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, well done. Congratulations, man. That is, I don't usually talk to people when we're talking about liberty, to people that have such accomplishments with so many different things. So I have the utmost faith that Kilroy Rising will be just as fruitful. Why did you stay the entire tour? You did not have to do that as an independent documentarian. There was no reason for you to do that. Why would you do that with an infantry combat unit?
So that was a really important launch of the direction where I'm at now. I made the choice to do so because I don't feel, and I still feel, that one of the biggest problems we have in telling stories is that people don't stay for the duration. When you really study documentary film, you'll find that it is not as unbiased as people like to think. Most of filming is done actually from a scripted paper with a predetermined end before it's ever cast. And it's one of the things that is one of the biggest lies going within the film and industry is that the majority of films start, like I say, with a predetermined end and an objective, and then there's a sequential process of doing multiple types of interviews until you accomplish the interview. You attain the interview that you want that fits the script. And what I said is we need to do this a different way because the story needs to be built around soldiers. And that the only thing that can happen in a story like that is that you need to stay the duration of a tour that they do, which was I went through the entire train up with them, which was 2 months, and then I I deployed with them, so I was there for 13 months in my initial run. And that period of time, you come to understand the problem sets deeply. You understand the cultural challenges deeply. You understand the soldiers deeply, and you get to see the progress from what is very typical in any sort of deployment, which are the initial highs of being deployed, to the midterm deep lows, to the end of term where you're mainly trying to retract back and keep yourself alive to get home safe. And that loop was what I decided to cover and did, and I was very, very happy that I did.
That's incredible. That's incredible dedication, and I appreciate that, man. I really appreciate the fortitude that it takes, the dedication, and I mean, you know, this is without talking about the obvious blatant courage and everything else that it takes to be there. Now, I want to tie that into a couple of other things. I'm going to try to wrap this up in a bow. Spatial Terra.
Yes.
Now, that was an asymmetrical warfare think tank that pioneered some of the implementation and comprehensive R&D that utilizes the understanding and complexities of operational tactics and technologies related to human domain analysis. Is that correct?
That's correct, and that's one of my specialties.
Okay.
So let me just give when I came out, so there's a number of things that have happened. And after the first year, my work was recognized, obviously, as accomplishing the Emmy. I'm going to say this cautiously because in no way I ever want to be perceived as trying to take credit for some, being some sort of great man in history type approach or arrogance, because it's not my thing. But I will tell you this very candidly, and really what opened my eyes. The videos that were released in July, actually August of 2006, were 3 videos of the Canadian soldiers in combat, which is Princess Patricia's Light Infantry out of Edmonton, Canada. And at that time, Canada was trending primarily against the war. And what happened with those videos is that those videos got released and all hell broke loose. And I got caught in the crossfire of a national debate. I was by name debated on the Commons floor as a threat to national security. The Liberal side of Canada discussed possibly forbidding me from ever entering the country again. I had the Toronto Sun absolutely scandalize me and try to find everything they could possibly about me that was wrong, but tell it as truth. And the part of this, the other side of this was the military, Canadian military, that was quietly reaching out to me and asking me if they could use the videos for training. I had an attempt by the Canadians, working with certain elements within the U.S. military, lower ranking, that tried to have me removed from country, all because these videos went out. And what had happened when they went out is the national polls dropped 2 points against the war. I had some fantastic people that I was working for, and they stood by me and all the way through this. And the amazing part is that what happened in the counterswing of this is the Canadian government, and because of those videos, was caught blindsided, because they had been telling the public that the Canadians were not in combat, in fact, were just peacekeepers, which was an outright lie. The Canadians were doing some amazing and heroic fighting, and it happened that I got to be with them because we had American-vetted trainers with them. And that part right there really opened my eyes to the power of media and communication, of what it could literally do, and literally change the nation, because it did. It converted the Canadian position on war from essentially about 30, I think they were running at the time about 36 to 42% against, to where it was, or I should say in favor, 36 to 42 in favor, to where after those videos, Canada launched to be, whereas it was a majority in favor of the war. The videos were used on every night. The basis of the videos were used every night on the opening news for CBC News. There was 2 mini documentaries done by CBC on me and my work and PPCLI. And the awareness in Canada went up exponentially, all from 3 video shorts released on YouTube. And YouTube was only a year old. Each of those videos had over 1 million hits at the time. They're no longer online thanks to a particularly very unethical filmmaker in New York that tried to commandeer them for his own purposes, claiming that he had open right to get them because I had given them to soldiers to use, and he was trying to reclaim his own copyright on them. So sadly, I had to pull those down. But it's part of a bigger project to release after this election year. But to kind of wrap that up for you, coming out of that, I made a number of contacts with Special Operations. Going forward, I continue to do work and keep my relations with them. And I continued to move forward and eventually became increasingly close with the Special Operations community and did direct work with them. And then leaving Afghanistan, started my own company, where my company I call Spatial Terra, for a longer discussion we can get into, and started that at working at Asymmetric Warfare Group under one of the Special Operations colonels that I'd worked with, and where I started to look at we started to delve deeper into this idea of information analysis and understanding the way to use information more effectively in the space of what the Special Operations community refers to as the human domain, or what we might call as the human environment.
And I promise I'm not having you do your bio just to do your bio. I will tie all of this together. It's a little bit of a reiteration, but it brings me to a couple of questions. And part of your expertise is being able to analyze a culture and understand the elements of influence through advertising and marketing. So first, how much of this ability has been instrumental in your work with Spatial Terra and your work with asymmetrical or counterinsurgency warfare groups or analysts? And I'll let you answer that before I ask the second question.
So a lot of the work that I was tasked with in Asymmetric Warfare Group was the next generation of threat. And we're facing those threats today and continue to face those threats. And I continue to analyze and innovate and work with people to help keep us ahead of those types of threats. Spatial Terra is built around those concepts. It's a hybrid type company in the sense of, when I say hybrid, it's a hybrid analytic type company that is working very heavily with a hybrid mix of marketing, branding, and advertising mixtures that mixes in with military type analysis, targeting analysis, atmospheric analysis, to produce out products, if you will, results, products that can be usable ultimately for the soldier on the ground to improve their survivability. And that's the concept of Spatial Terra in the defense side. And on the commercial side, we can get into that a little later. But on the defense side, that's where the focus has been, is ultimately improving the soldier's survivability and creating an overmatch capability for these soldiers on the ground so they can dominate and totally win in the fighting environment.
And some of your work where you are analyzing for anticipation has to do with understanding not just the human environment, but the human condition emotionally. You have to anticipate emotional awareness, the tone, the pulse of the people, things like that. This brings me to my second question. When you look around and observe the U.S. media influences, what is your analysis of that?
So the U.S. media has, I believe it happened under, I want to say it happened under Gerald Ford, and I could be mistaken. It could have happened under Nixon. But the three big agencies, CBS, NBC, ABC, originally had a measure of federal funding. And this is an important piece to understand, because to me, that kept the balance within news reporting, that kept it at least more towards center. The problem that has happened is that as the media organizations have become completely independent and free-floating, driven by advertising dollars, which for a long time media was driven towards the advertising piece of classified ads. But as we moved into the digital age and you have things like Craigslist and other things taking away those ads, increasingly the only way media can hype its circulation is to create literally media hype. Driving that, as they become increasingly purchased by just a few mega companies or billionaire owners, media has ceased to become a source of reporting, and it has become a mechanism of propaganda. Now, I say this very bluntly because I worked in that space of looking at how to create influence programs using media. So when I look at media, I don't look at media as fair and neutral. In the mainstream media, I look at media as hostile, and that is part of the adversarial force that's trying to push this global agenda, and they're being backed by people that have a reason and a drive for their own personal gain, which has nothing to do with the American sovereignty or the American public. So when I see media today, and I've had in the past I've had numerous interviews with the media, and I will tell you But the one thing about media is they will look at anything that they can find to grab you, snag it, and cut and clip to get their message across regardless of truth. There is no balance or objective of truth. They will tell you there is. But at the end of the day, they're so highly focused on one singular outcome. It goes back to what I said earlier about documentary films. It's almost as if their stories are pre-scripted in the sense that they don't come in as objective journalists, but they arrive at the story with a predetermined end. And when you do that, you're no longer a journalist, you're a propagandist. And so for me, most of the mainstream media is simply a propaganda arm of the globalist elites that are trying to drive this country into some version of a global colony.
Okay. All right, let me interrupt here. Here for just a second, guys. Sorry about that. Jeremy, I know you're probably on a roll, and you're doing great. The two of y'all are doing great. By the way, Miss Producer in the background, break number 2, have that ready to go. You're listening to the Liberty Restoration Information Show. All the tools, everything you need in order to participate in the restoration of our constitutional republic is available at thelibertypledge.com. That's THE, Liberty, like the Statue of Liberty, Pledge, like the Pledge of Allegiance. Run it all together, thelibertypledge.com. We've got our guest tonight, Scott Kesterson from Kilroy Rising. And when we come back from this short little break, Scott, I'm going to ask you to return your focus on Kilroy Rising for, 5 or 10 minutes or so. Again, on the basis, what led you there. And by the way, sir, I didn't know I had a tiger by the tail when I reached out earlier in the week. Jeremy's done his homework. That's why he's an amazing and fabulous co-host to have. And Scott, thanks for being here. Hang on, everybody. We will be back in about 5 minutes or less with more from Scott Kesterson. And we're going to get into the basics and the foundings of Kilroy Rising. And then we're going to tie it in with the LRC. And we'll see where our roads join. And we can travel down a certain distance, probably together, and help each other along the way. We'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Miss Producer, please, if you would start the promo. We will be back in just a couple of minutes.
We are the Liberty Restoration Committee, and so are you. I believe in this plan because I want to restore my constitutional republic. No longer do I want to live in a perceived democracy. These are the very reasons I believe in this plan. Not because I want to be ruled by 51% of the people, as in a democracy, where 49% of the people become slaves. It's we the people. It's you and me. It's everybody in this country have the same liberties. No more division. A unified country. A country that goes back to its principles and its basis, where every state is sovereign. No more federal overreach. No more governmental agencies. No more federal tax. I want my tax dollars to go to my state, not to the federal government. We are the Liberty Restoration Committee, and so are you.
What would have happened if our founding fathers had just decided to stay under the tyrannical government of the British King and worked within the framework of his laws that he signed? Would they have been granting us rights to govern ourselves? No, we would just look like Europe today. The Liberty Restoration Committee is not asking us to deny our founders. On the contrary, this small group of people is asking you to think about what our founders did and what does this mean to this generation. Signing the Declaration of Intent is like saying, I uphold the Constitution, and like our founders warned us, we face a tyrannical government and that we are willing to uphold the Constitution. I think it should be clear that no one is asking you to start a new country. Our country was founded. The Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights will not change at all, but the perversion and outright mistreatment of our current Constitution needs our help.
We are the Liberty Restoration Committee, and so are you.
All right, let's get back to Scott Kesterson, Kilroy Rising. Scott, we appreciate you once again for taking the time out to be on the show. And let me tell you, folks, I will be posting and sharing across all the LRC pages, my personal page, and everything else, as Scott makes appearances on a couple of other programs that will be coming up within the next few weeks. I'll let you know where to stay in touch with Scott. And also, any of you guys listening, you veterans out there that are listening, if you are not, for some reason, aware of Kilroy Rising, Scott, tell them where they can find you and how they can become a part of it.
Sure. Okay, so let's start right there, and then we'll loop back into a little more about Kilroy Rising. So Kilroy Rising is KilroyRising.com. You can find us on the web, That's our website is KilroyRising.com. You can also find us on Twitter which is at Kilroy, or at Kilroy Rising, on Twitter at Kilroy Rising, and then we're also on Facebook at Kilroy Rising PAC. If you go to the site, you'll see our letter of endorsement. There's some links to some videos. We're on YouTube on Kilroy Rising as well, and there's a lot of things starting to happen with this on the website. It's going through a revision. It's going to be a big new launch this next week. There's some new products available, and if you get in there's an opportunity we're glad to get you signed up and get active to support us with stickers that we'll send out to you, which is
requesting permission, sir, that we can put your links on our website as well to give
Absolutely.
folks a link across. That's very good. Just requesting permission. Just wanted to get that out of the way. Continue, please.
No problem at all. So, and then obviously, as the PAC, and what we're really trying to focus is that this is also representative of what the best part of political PACs is, which is donations from people to drive this forward. It's a part of Kilroy in its design. And so as I kind of go into this now, Kilroy, one of the things when I looked at super PACs is I think that the criticism of super PACs, if you notice, comes very heavily from those that abuse them the most. And the reason they say that is there's really a push right now from the left to try to get the PACs shut down, which is a normal process if you look at what PACs are. PACs are a big threat to the left, and the left wants to seize the maximum control that they can and then shut those PACs down. PACs were designed to be an ability for citizens, and hence the Citizens United position, for citizens to bring together their money and be active within the political circle without having to be directly tied to a candidate. And that's a very, very important piece about how this, in our current climate, it's a huge freedom piece, and it's one of those things that I'm really big on with this PAC. We don't have any major singular backers. Our donations come from people that want to support the idea, a lot of small donations, and most of this, like I said originally, still remains as funded from myself personally. So if I may, I'm going to kind of go into a little bit here I want to get kind of calibrated here on what the principles that are driving Kilroy. And then I think that as we go through this, then we can bash with some of the questions more about me and kind of my bio, if you will, that ties to all this. But I think there's three pieces that I've talked about so far that are pretty critical. And it deals with war, it deals with the ability to understand the importance of media, and then the importance that can lead to driving political shift. And that is my example that I gave with Canada, and how instrumental that is today. It's an instrumental and very critical point in my process, in my career, where I realized that literally a single individual with the passion and the eye to capture truth and capture moments, very powerful moments, and lace those together to tell stories that are driven in the foundation of truth, you can literally change a nation. When we look at that in terms of what Kilroy represents, Kilroy is an upending of if you will, a reversal of the special operations type mission. We're putting information as the tool of warfare front and center. Information and information influence becomes the driving component. Now, when you talk to a political person, they're going to say, well, they do that normally. But it doesn't. I wouldn't say that this is as normal, because the piece that's really driving Kilroy is to get under the headlines, to get under the things that are coming out of our propaganda media, and to try to really shake people up into the space where they start to disrupt the types of the type of shaped and the restrictive thinking that they have. It's what we call cognitive disruption. We're trying to get people to wake them up and get them going and thinking about the challenges that they're currently facing in the political environment. With using special operations veterans, what they're exceptional at is reaching out and organizing. And that's where reaching out and connecting to veterans and other veterans community to become active across the country. We've been doing this for months to really ramp this up, get them active in this information piece, to engage on social media, to engage in public forum, to engage any way that they can to drive that story home about the principles of what they fought and stood for. These are the things we're talking about fighting for liberty. We're talking about fighting for protection of sovereignty of the United States. We're talking about maintaining jobs and bringing jobs back home. And we're talking about emphasizing unity of America as a one America, not a hyphenated America or a divided America. Those are the principles that are driving this veteran back piece. And the special operations backbone to this is critical because it's a piece of looking at multipliers. What I can do go ahead.
Well, Scott, Mr. Interrupter here, Ernest again, interrupting, and I really you'll either come to enjoy this because of the directions that I send you in, or you'll come to say, man, I wish this guy would just shut up and let me talk. But you and I had a long conversation the other day, very enlightening, because we came to realize that our goals are actually, almost identical. I mean, we want our country back. We want to go a step further. I mean, you and I talked, the power structure in this country is supposed to be, or was set up to be, first the people, that then created the state governments that became sovereign nation states prior to the Declaration of Independence, and then the union that was formed afterwards. Understand? I bet that sent a shockwave through you, didn't it?
Yeah.
Not a problem. Hey, look, man, this is Block Talk. Two tin cans and a string sometimes here. But anyway, but the power structure, the only reason for governments to be formed is to protect the rights, the liberty, and the property of the people. That's the only reason for governments to exist. So the power structure in this country is supposed to be, and for, over 100 years it was, the people, then the states, and then the federal government inside a tiny box to do very specific things. Now, if you look at the flip side of that, number one, do you agree that was what was the intention? That we are supposed to be a self-governed nation, and that, we don't need a whole lot of direction. We need a whole lot of liberty and a whole lot of freedom. As long as we don't infringe somebody else's liberty, we pretty much ought to be able to do what we want to do. That sounds pretty extreme and pretty radical, but I think you understand the point. But the power structure should be the people, the states, and then the federal government doing a very few defined things. Now, would you agree or disagree with that?
I definitely. I think the critical piece here, as you had, is the power of the people. Right. And we are a country that is supposed to have a government by, for the people, by, for, and with the people, not a government that is dominating the people. I think that's a very critical difference. So we're talking.
But anyway, that's been flipped on its head. It now, and people have come to accept the idea that the federal government is the end-all authority in this nation, when nothing could be further from the truth. And it really shouldn't be. And what the power of the people, number one, is so much greater than the people in power if the people would just remember it and utilize it. And that's a fight that you and I both are struggling to educate people with. And I think it's one of your cornerstones, or one of the things that we agreed upon when we had our initial conversation. And I'm not trying to shove the LRC down your throat, and you're not trying to shove Kilroy Rising. I think Kilroy Rising is an amazing idea, and the more I learn about you as an individual, sir, you are absolutely the individual that needs to be the tip of the spear on this. And by the same token, there's so many ways that I just feel like we could work together. Number one, I didn't mean to cut you off, didn't mean to interrupt, but if you would, the core focus, and don't forget to bring up and make a point, please, sir, about the September 11th delivery of a letter to Mr. Trump.
Okay, so I think it's really important that we just get to that, because once we got past both of the conventions, everything, all of the clutter in the field of politics this year, and remembering what I said is, this is a year that we are making a decision about an insurgency. And if you want to look at it from the point of view of vote, we're in the midst of an insurgency in this country. And are we going to vote for the insurgents, or are we going to vote to retain the republic and bring our country back? And once we cleared through the conventions and the two candidates appeared, and the other two side candidates of the Green Party and our Libertarian don't really count, because they're not going to, they just don't represent what the mainstream body politic is going to do, and it's definitely not going to have any impact on the change of this country, at least not now. So we're left with two candidates. And after going through this and looking at the two candidates, there's only singularly one candidate that represents the principles that are going to give us an opportunity to start pulling this country back, and it's Donald J. Trump. So on 9/11, at 8:46 a.m., at the time when the first aircraft hit the North Tower, I was at Trump Tower. And on that morning, this last Sunday, I hand-delivered a letter signed by me with 124 names of Special Operations veterans, names underneath that letter, endorsing Donald J. Trump. Now, if I may, I'd like to read that letter, because I think that will sum up a lot of what we're talking about here. Is that okay?
Oh, yes, sir. Go right ahead.
Okay, so this is what we wrote, and this is the letter of endorsement we gave to Donald Trump. And it begins with this. What do you believe in so much that you are willing to sacrifice everything to defend? America has been changed. The past 7 years of an insurgent presidency has fractured and divided the country in ways unseen since the Civil War. We now stand at a precipice of change. We will never fully return to the past, but we must now choose between remaining a nation and salvaging our republic, or being transformed by a leftist insurgency into a global colony. Today, we make our voices known. Kilroy Rising is a special operations veterans political action group linked with veterans organizations from all services. All of us are proud Americans representing the melting pot. We are mobilizing across the country to support local community groups to empower their vote, share their stories, and become connected as a unified front to stop the progressive left madness that has taken root across our country. We have served this country. We have fought for this country. We have bled for this country. We have struggled for our own nation that was entrusted to our leaders who have been quietly serving their own self-interest of the ruling and intellectual elite, forgetting what this country was built upon and who it was built for. While we were protecting Americans and the values of this country, we have come to realize that our greatest threat was here at home. This year's presidential election is not about parties, but a choice between two things: ensuring we have a nation or becoming part of a global one-world government. We must all now choose. To that end, there is only one candidate, Donald J. Trump. And for those that question Mr. Trump, we point to his support and endorsement by Lieutenant General retired Mike Flynn, one of America's great generals who is a man of unquestioned integrity and loyalty to this great nation. As members of the Special Operations community, we have never wavered in our commitment and professional standards required to protect and defend the United States of America, no matter how dangerous the mission. We therefore join Lieutenant General retired Mike Flynn and endorse Donald J. Trump for President of the United States. Information is now the weapon of choice. We must use it to disrupt the cognitive dissonance that has taken hold across this massive liberal America, to disempower their ideology, rupture their false narratives of progressive racism, and restore the roots of the constitutional republic. To honor this mission and legacy of American spirit, we have resurrected an iconic image from World War II. Kilroy Rising is based on the legendary iconic character from World War II, Kilroy, that carried the hearts of America in the time when we fought to protect our nation and the world, to vanquish those that sought to destroy us. Kilroy Rising PAC is once again the battle cry of America, laughing at the world who expects us to fail, mocking the pundits who believe we will fall, reminding those who rule that power is with the citizens of this great nation. We will appear at will and without notice across this country as a reminder that we are everywhere speaking the language of Americans in a country united. Those are the values we carried with us, and now the values we embodied in the Kilroy Rising PAC. Respectfully, Scott Kesterson, with 124 Special Operations names underneath. That is the letter we handed to Donald J. Trump, and handed for him, not to him personally, but handed to his office on September 11th at 8:46 a.m. in New York City at the Trump Tower. And that is our letter of endorsement.
Absolutely amazing. Mr. Deeter, I hadn't meant to leave you out of the conversation since the break, sir. Your comments, questions, suggestions?
No, man, that was fantastic. I appreciate the body of work that has been put forth by what you've been able to do, Scott. I think you've been able to accomplish a lot of different things, and that's how I was going to wrap things up in a bow. You, in short, you're a dangerous man. You're a really dangerous man. That's what it comes down to. You really understand asymmetrical warfare, and you're an American that was trained by the best. So when you look around your own country, you know exactly what you're seeing. You're trained in counterinsurgency along with that. And I know they kind of run one and the same, but there are some differences. And you understand these principles, not just from marketing and advertising perspective, but the way that you can polarize a people. So when you understand those things, coming together on a movement, whether it's a political action committee or whatever it is, I believe that because you understand very well what it is that we are up against, you're able to combat it very effectively. And that makes you an incredibly dangerous man. Now, I've listened to you. I've heard you say and make reference to a quiet insurgency or a whisper campaign against America that is going on in D.C. And I wanted to ask, because when you look at the LRC and you look at Kilroy Rising, and I've heard you say in interviews, I've heard you say, we want our country back. We just want our country back. And when you look at what's going on here, let me ask, because I know you know how to run a campaign of insurgency, is that blatantly what you're seeing going on here? And do you think that things such as your political action committee or movements as the Liberty Restoration Committee are kind of a normal reaction to a campaign of insurgency against us?
So I would start there and say I don't think it's a normal reaction. I think it's a necessary and urgent reaction to what we're facing. We're at the 11th hour, and I think that we're seeing the awakening of America with the volumes of people that are rallying around Donald J. Trump. But take Trump aside, and it's the realization that people are starting to reclaim something very, very important. They're reclaiming that spirit of America. And that spirit of America has been part of that very slow and very deliberate attempt to rupture that belief that America had hope, that America was strong in unity, that America was a people-driven country, not an elite country dominating the people. So when I look at this and I started to look across the organizations and we say, and I'm just going to use some corporate formations here that are important to understand. If you're a company, you're receiving contracts. So it means that you're subject to somebody else's needs and desires. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's part of the function of a company. If you are a product company, you're selling something, you're still subject to the will of the customer and what they want you to build ultimately. If you're a nonprofit, you can't be active as a 501c3 nonprofit. You can't be active in politics, but you can do research on things, and they can have a certain orientation or bias, but you have to stay out of political fight. But when we get into this sort of insurgency, it's been very, very strategic and well thought out because it runs the gap in seeing between what our agencies don't do well to resist. It's driven on information. It's driven on quiet whisper campaigns. It's driven on influencing youth. It's influencing our academic institutions, and it's shifting the power of thinking. So what is it that counters that? And one of the legal institutions that we have that allows for unlimited wealth or accumulation of money to use in the operation without restrictions or limitations is the PAC. And ironically, the greatest thing about the PAC is it becomes one of the greatest formations to organize under, to counter the insurgency that has been using these PACs very quietly and other organizations. They've been using their nonprofits. They've been using their 501c4s. They've been using their corporate entities to quietly steer this. But now the PAC can come out. And the PAC is an aggressive, and Kilroy has been designed to be a trench fighter. It's funny because I get criticized. I've had a lot of criticism thrown at how Kilroy approaches problems on Twitter. People would say, you're so aggressive. And there's just things that I sometimes can't agree with. And I've had people literally recite to me 5, 10, 15 tweets. And I'm really kind of left almost laughing because as I look at them, I'm saying, okay, but you just repeated 5 or 10 tweets perfectly, which means Kilroy had its necessary effect. It's got you thinking. It's got you thinking past what the mainstream propaganda media is trying to shove down your throat. It's got you focused on what is being said in that message, and you're trying to cognitively process that, and you're trying to understand what it means, and that's great because Kilroy is the trench fighter. It's the trench fighter for the people, and the part of bringing in special operations is another message for America. These veterans truly are America's best in this sort of area. And it's a statement to let them know that we're here. We're here because this country is not just going to go away. And as much as you want to hear the mainstream media and the propaganda media drive this message that, they're going to tell you that globalism is what everybody wants. But apparently that's not the truth because we're seeing the rise of someone, Donald J. Trump, who's not a traditional globalist. He's not against global trade, but he's definitely putting America first. You're going to hear the message that globalism you have to have globalism or you'll fail. Brexit got told the same message. And now we're being told this by tenfold every single day. But I'm going to tell you something. That America's veterans and American Special Operations veterans did not risk their lives for a one-world government. They risked their lives for the Stars and Stripes. They risked their lives for what is America and what we stand for in the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the Bill of Rights. Now, where we go forward from here, and it's in that first paragraph of this letter, is that America has been changed. So as we look forward into what intersections we have together, I think there are many, because there's no doubt that going backwards isn't going to be something we just do. You don't just simply turn the clock back and say, okay, we're going to go back, because things have changed. And because things have changed, smartly, we have to move forward with the foundation, the basis, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the reminder of the Declaration of Independence. But there is definitely, obviously, something has to be done to rein in this federal overreach, because it's no matter what we keep doing, the promises of politicians are empty. They don't do anything but tell people what they think people want to hear to acquire the power in politics, to acquire the position in Washington, to then drive their own personal agenda, and that has to stop.
Well, I appreciate that answer. I couldn't picture a more thorough answer. I want to throw it back to Ernest.
No,
but,
yeah, that was absolutely amazing. As a matter of fact, I was listening, going, you haven't, and I'm not putting you on the spot, you haven't yet read the plan or the Declaration of Intent or the People's Constitution, but yet you just spoke what it represents, and and you haven't read it yet. And what amazes me, Scott, is the number of people that don't get it. Now, I share your support of Donald Trump. Okay, I do. I mean, we are down to, it doesn't matter who got their feelings hurt, who didn't make it. This man came upon the scene, and he had the pulse of the nation in mind, and I believe he believes everything he says. Okay, so I applaud you for your endorsement. Now, but to restore the republic, like you said, we've got to be able to do something. Well, as you get into this, you're going to see some rather bold stuff from the LRC, because we've addressed everything you said that needs to be done, and we really have. It's been addressed by some of the great constitutional minds in this country. They have either directly consulted, or all of their works and their words and their teachings and everything else have been pulled from. And there's been a look, and this is as bold a move. I'll put it this way, from a civilian standpoint, this is kind of like a special operation. It really is, because to restore the republic to its original intent and to stop this out of control federal government, drastic measures are going to have to be taken. Now, by that, I don't mean violence. Nobody in the LRC is talking about any kind of violent revolution, blood in the streets or anything like this. But once we go through the same process and utilize the process that the precedent has been set for, this is a step beyond a convention of states. This is a step beyond all these things, because it takes us and resets us back to day one, removes from office all elected and appointed, officials. We've approached the Trump campaign, and they've been back with us and said, how would Donald feel like being able to come out and say, look, I support this, because what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to look at me after you've elected me. You're going to be able to look at me and say, you know what, you're fired. But then we're going to rehire you. And when we rehire you, we will have replaced the House, the Senate. We will have replaced all the Supreme Court justices. We will have taken and reset us to day one. We will have rendered null and void all previous federal laws, good, bad, or otherwise. We will have rendered null and void all previous Supreme Court decisions. We go back to the reset of day one. Now, you say we can't go backwards, but we must reestablish the republic. I think once you look at this and see the bold plan and see that the Constitution has remained intact, it's there. 90% of the content is there. And you say, whoa, wait a minute, that leaves 10%. 10% can be dangerous. Well, the 10% are things like term limits, balanced budget, doing away with all the alphabet federal agencies, returning the sovereignty of the states, protecting the rights and the liberties and the property of we, the people, returning us to the constitutional common law this nation was founded on, not the admiralty law or the corporate law or any other of these boondoggle tinfoil hat situations. This undoes 150 years of going the wrong direction. And it does it through the power of the people, working through the individual state legislative bodies to get this accomplished. Now, is this a short-term quick fix? Oh, no, it's not. This will be a hard-fought battle, and I guarantee you the very first state that ratifies the People's Constitution will start a domino effect that will sweep this nation from literally sea to shining sea. That's what we're working on. That's what we're pushing. Go ahead, sir.
Well, you said something that's very important because I'm going to start at this point. Typically, when we talk about PAC, their duration is designed to be for the duration of a political campaign. And at the end of that campaign, win or lose, the PAC evaporates. But that's not the way I set up Kilroy Rising. Kilroy Rising is not just a PAC registered as an individual through the FEC, which is the typical way. Kilroy Rising is actually licensed through an LLC, a company, corporate structure, and it's done so intentionally because Kilroy Rising as an entity is going to remain in play for as long as it needs to accomplish many of the common goals that we have here that you're talking about here. True to point, I will absolutely admit transparently that I have not had time to go through and read through the People's Constitution. However, everything you've talked about is from at this point in level, what you've talked about, everything is in direction of what we have common goals, and there's absolutely no question about it.
Absolutely. Well, it's like I told you the other day. So many things attack the branches of tyranny. The plan of the LRC attacks the roots.
Right. And the point is that
that's
we need to keep whatever process we go through has to keep the federal arm of the government, and for that matter, even local arms of the government, in check. Where we are right now is this wanton level of power grab and corruption that is unbelievable. I mean, we're sitting in a city right now, over here on the East Coast, and you look at cities on the East Coast, and you look at, for example, what happened today in Philadelphia, and then you see what happened in Houston, Texas. But let's focus on Philadelphia for a minute. This is a city. Philadelphia is a city of the original city where the Declaration of Independence was signed, the Liberty Bell. It's a city of brotherly love. And that brotherly love was built on an ethic of work, not an ethic of sanctuary cities and illegal immigration sitting here and having safe zones to operate out of within the United States. And by the way, that's a very critical subpoint here I want to hit for people. When you're dealing with an insurgency, one of the critical aspects to the success or failure of the insurgency is where the insurgency has to acquire safe haven. One of the things ISIS has right now is safe havens around the world. We haven't been able to rupture those safe havens. When you look at what sanctuary cities are, especially sanctuary cities that are allowing criminals to exist and not being able to be reported to the federal government, Philadelphia is one of those cities. San Francisco is one of those cities. What you have created is sanctuary for your insurgency. And this is, again, I go back to what this election is. This election is not an election about a candidate. It's an election about the aspects of what the candidates represent and the best avenue forward to help preserve the republic. Your mission here with the LRC, and for those, and I say this very openly, for those that have objections to Donald Trump, for those that have felt that this process, they're not happy with the Republican candidate, or they're not happy with any candidate, they need to hear this very clearly. The mission of the LRC, to be successful, you still have to have a republic in structure or framework to work within. If you allow Hillary Clinton to get in power, I will give you what our estimate is that the remainder of the United States will retain intact. And it is approximately 120 days. At the end of that period of time, with the execution of executive orders, with the collaboration of her globalist buddies that are all just seated throughout Washington, D.C. and seated throughout New York City, you're going to have a complete teardown of what is left and what is remaining, protecting our country. And the first action that's going to happen on that level is going to be creating a borderless America. And the second action, and you can watch it, is going to be some version of federalizing the local police. Those two actions combined will begin a tidal wave of other events that will start to roll in the globalist control in this country, and we will cease to have the ability through elected process and peaceful process of change, because it will be stolen from us.
Well, and you know what, Scott? At that point with Hillary Clinton, you and I both climbed the ladder of the domestic terrorist watch list. I've been on the list since 2013, and that comes from an assistant director of the Department of Homeland Security. That is, or he was in 2013.
Well, here's what I can tell you, and it's pretty amazing when you think about this. I was just informed the other day, again, from a high-level person at Homeland Security, that they have set out, this administration has set out individuals to track all of those that are in special operations community, that especially that carry high-level clearances in the government. Now,
I don't doubt it.
So I can assure you that if I wasn't, I am one of many on a list, and I can assure you with this latest letter of endorsement that I'm already on the IRS list, and I am definitely probably on the Clinton Foundation kill list, if you want to look at it that way. I mean,
yeah, well, I understand that as well.
You know, this is I think a lot of people have a hard time. I had a meeting yesterday with some folks, and they were asking me. We were talking about just an amazing attorney that wants to wants to give up his practice and get into doing politics, but for the sole purpose, because he's at the end of his career, he just wants to help things get right. It's one of these great people you meet, and you're like, wow, we need about 1,000 of him right now, right? But in the process, we had some discussions about where politics were and about the Clinton campaign, and we talked about the positions on Donald Trump and their concerns about him, etc. But you know what's really amazing is when you start to lay this thing out and you start to map out, most people are just not aware and have a hard time processing because it's not within the American DNA, especially within the American political DNA, to believe that in the political sphere you could have a criminal organization, which is basically the Clinton mafia, not only running American politics, but affecting global politics at the same time. And when you talk about that magnitude of power and that magnitude of money, which is in the billions and trillions of dollars transacting, a single life means nothing. And if you think about that, you start to really realize how important it is as a mass of people. The reason the populist movement in this country is so important is it needs to stand up, it needs to unify, it needs to be together, it needs to look out for one another, and it needs to take this country back. There's no other way to it. And I guess I'll close this line of thinking here just for this time being, is that when you hear about how right globalism is and how wrong everybody is, there's a question that people need to sit back if they have any doubts and ask. If this thing in globalism and if this thing with tearing the country apart was so easy, then why are they so afraid? And why are they giving so much emphasis to try to tear down the populist movement? And the answer is simple. Because the people still have power.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, the thing government fears the most is when their divisions and their attempts at dividing us in all the ways, the hundreds and thousands of ways. And Jeremy's done a lot of work and put a lot of words and given a lot of understanding to a lot of people about all the many hundreds and thousands of ways that they try and divide us, and all the hundreds and thousands of ways because they know that they have to in order to maintain their agenda, these agendas that you referred to earlier. And the agendas are headed in that direction. I have good friends, close friends. Some are at the point to where they find it hard to even function during the day because the blows are coming faster and harder, and we can't seem to go past one atrocity until there's another 2 or 3 added to the plate the next day, and it continues to build that way. And it's been doing this for years and years. It's just been accelerated so fast in the last 7 years that in some ways I think that their arrogance, cockiness, corruption, and everything else, they believe their own press releases because they've accelerated it to the point to where people have said, you know what, we've had enough. And I mean, just like you say, the rise of Donald Trump and the way he captured the emotion of the American people and reawakened and gave people a chance at real hope and real change, not the phony crap we were sold back in 2008, but the fact that he tapped into that and that people are so willing. But let me say just a word of caution. I support Trump. I support what Kilroy Rising did. I support what Scott is doing and all the things. But let me make this clear once again. This man's going to need help. One man can change the direction of the country. Look at what Obama's done in 7 years. But he's had a whole lot of folks collaborating with him. And Donald Trump can make a huge difference, but he's not going to be able to do it alone. He can't do it alone. So, casting your vote this November and creating a popular vote landslide for Donald Trump, possibly, Donald Trump could be the first presidential candidate in history to win all 50 states, even in a landslide in most states. It's very, very, very possible. But then you've got the arrogance of George Soros saying, yeah, Trump will win the popular vote, but we've already made arrangements. Hillary's got the electorate vote tied up. I mean, how can that man come out and say that and make those statements publicly unless their arrogance and everything else has come to the point to where they already think they've already succeeded? And the question you have to ask yourself is, have they? And if they have, are we going to allow them to keep their success? Or are we going to come together, unify, and say, not just no, but hell no. No more. No more. It's the people coming together, uniting. Put aside your differences. There's actually something called the Liberty Pledge, not just the libertypledge.com. I call it the Liberty Pledge to be able to identify it. But we've got a section in there that, we will not attack any group or any action that values liberty. Yet, on almost every front, people attack our movement. Oh, it just won't work. And you know how quickly people will look and they'll say, these guys want to mess with the Constitution. They haven't looked at what we've proposed. Because if they looked at it, they would see the Constitution screaming at them, yes, this is what we need in this nation. This is what we need in this country. This needs to be done, and the people need to make sure it gets done. So we're not lacking for passion here at the LRC, and we're not lacking for reason, and we're not lacking in constitutional knowledge either. So if you've been on the fence, or if you've been swayed by someone else that says, that'll never work, or, I'm too busy, or there's hundreds or thousands of different things, I think they're full of crap. Okay, that's fine. Think what you will. It's not going to take a majority of the people. Will the Liberty Restoration Committee, will Kilroy Rising, as a matter of fact, or any combination of the groups or these groups and other groups, will we ever reach membership in the hundreds of millions of people? Probably not. But I guarantee you, the Liberty Restoration Committee, the plan of it, you give me 3,000 to 4,000 dedicated people in each state, just 3,000 to 4,000. Multiply that by 50 if you want to. They can get the job done. They can get the job done. Look at the plan. Look at all the pieces of the plan. Study all the documents, all the tools that are there, and then make your decision. Are you going to let somebody else determine your future, the future for your children, your grandchildren, and everything else? Or are we going to be known as the next greatest generation? Scott is here representing and reviving an icon, Kilroy, from the greatest generation. Are we going to be known as the generation that lost liberty for 1,000 years? Or are we going to be known as the next greatest generation that restored it? Where do you fall? Where do you fall? It's that simple. Mr. Deeter, save me, sir, and turn this back over to Scott somehow. Or, Mr. Producer, I don't know. I've got my communication set up. I'm challenged. I don't know how many, if any, callers or whatever we have. Scott, are you good to hang around and maybe take a few questions from callers in the last 30 minutes here?
Absolutely.
All right, cool. Mr. Deeter.
Sure. I wanted to, before we get to the callers and all of that, I know we have Warren on the line. I just wanted to thank you again for being here and all of the work that you've done, Mr. Kesterson. We've, it seems like these 2 hours or hour and a half thus far have gone by really quick. And I talked to Ernest about it before, but I wanted to extend an invitation for you to join me on my show on evolution as well, because I could pick your brain forever. I really could. Somebody who, it drives me crazy. I've told people for a few years, look, it's asymmetrical warfare. You wouldn't be able to take the United States head on militarily, so you have to do it from the inside. This started 30, 40 years ago when they really got aggressive. And then I listened to you on some shows, and you've said the exact same things. So could you give us some of that? Just your general, look, this is what's going on. This is what I see. You know what I mean? Could you give us some of that?
Sure. So just real quick, would love to be on your show. Just send me whatever you want. I'll make the time. So that's the first thing. So, and thank you very much for the invite. So it's absolutely a pleasure talking with you all tonight. And I think that as we kind of focus this in, I think that one thing we have to talk about before we close out tonight as well is how we can work together and really maximize the strengths of our organizations to accomplish those common goals, which is to take this country back. There is no possible way that a military force can strike the United States, destroy the United States, without incurring such massive a level of retaliation and casualty that it would be an impossible victory. Hence the MAD strategy that we have held to officially or unofficially since the nuclear period began. But what we are not prepared for, what we were never prepared for, was that somebody would actually use our system against us, to use the legal process of voting, to use town hall representation, to use education to get teachers embedded in places with tenure where you can't remove them, to get universities to be incubators to shape the minds of our youth, to use our government people in place, to use lobbyists who had unlimited loads of capital to influence our politicians so that they ceased to become representatives of the people and they became tools of another agenda. We didn't have the ability within the system to ever foresee the rise of mega power and mega billionaires, where they openly have set out to change the world. George Soros, Mark Zuckerberg, Eric Schmidt, people who have an intent and a design that has nothing to do with the Constitution and nothing to do with the Republic, but has to do with markets, their vision of what they want the world to be, and total totalitarian control. This is the war we face. This is the war we have to fight, and it's the war the nation has to wake up to be vigilant, to work together, and to overcome. Kilroy Rising is in that fight, and at the backbone of that fight is the rally call for America to hear is you have America's finest. The veterans that were trained to do this type of warfare have now come home. They're already home, but now they've awoken. They said, we're here to help. And this is a war of information, as we've said it in our list. This is a war of awareness, awakening, and participation. And people have to get active and vigilant. You can't sit home and just expect this to go away. You can't watch the TV and listen to what's being there. Shut the TV off. Engage with the community. Start to read. Get away from the propaganda machines that are surrounding you, and start to engage in this country and invest in this country for the people of this country to save them. That would be my statement.
Really appreciate that.
What a statement that was. Go ahead, Mr. Deeter. You probably have more information on callers than I do, so bring them on.
Well, I think we have Warren with us. If our fearless producer would care to bring him on, I believe he may have had a question or comment.
Hello.
Hey, Warren, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, well, we can hear you, sir. Please, go ahead.
Well, first of all, Scott, man, it's a pleasure to talk to you in any way, shape, matter, or form. I'm ex-military myself, not special ops or anything like that. I did have a brother-in-law that was 3 tours in Vietnam. And I wasn't originally a Trump fan, I'll be honest. However, I have since gotten my wits about me, maybe, for lack of a better term. My biggest issue since I've joined the LRC is trying to recruit other folks that are like-minded, and getting past, well, we have a modified constitution that we want to enforce, and when I get to that point in pretty much any conversation with anyone, especially a fellow military person, that's when I see the arms cross and all of the telltale signs that they have shut me off and they're not going to listen anymore. How have you been able to get past that?
So first of all, thank you for your service, and
thank you.
Sounds like you come from a great family of service as well. And you said your brother was in Vietnam.
Brother-in-law did 3 tours in Nam as a LERP. I'm sure you know that term.
Oh, very much. And please tell him welcome home. So here's what I would say. I think that what I need to do is I have some ideas that I'm not going to be able to, without having gone through in depth the People's Constitution, I'm not going to be able to address some of what you said on specifics. So if you'll bear with me just on some general concepts.
Okay.
I'm going to offer to the LRC is an opportunity for me to go through that and to suggest some different messaging that might be more receptive. There's one thing I'm extremely good at. It's developing these sort of messages and cultural messages. But on a bigger level, I think that I think people need to absorb what's there themselves without hitting them over the head with the point that we're trying to change something. We are in the midst of an electoral change, an election of change, and it has everybody at off base right now. My recommendation, and I'm not going to be speaking for the LRC, and if you've got folks here who don't agree with me, then please jump in. But what I would recommend is to really just emphasize, first of all, that this is about reclaiming the principles of what this country was built upon. And then let that sink in. I would give them something to read, and I wouldn't try to sell them on the change aspects, but let them discover it. I think it's an important process, because what happens then is you develop a dialogue. And instead of trying to tell somebody, I mean, you're right about one thing, and I had the same reaction. When I was told that this is the People's Constitution, we made some changes, boy, I'll tell you, the hair stood up on the back of my neck, and I was like, whoa, hold on a minute.
Exactly.
But I've seen so far, I'm very impressed with, because the pieces it's like I said in our first paragraph there, we said that America has been changed. And in order for us to reclaim things in going forward, we have to address also what has gone wrong. So the biggest part of that is, once we talk about the piece of, hey, we're trying to save America. We're trying to bring back the republic. We're trying to bring back what this country was built upon, to restore the freedoms to the people of this country. I have something I'd like you to read. It's the LRC. Take a look at this. Yes, it's the Constitution. Review the Constitution. Tell me what you think. And let them go through it and discover it. And when they discover this, and they're going to ask you some questions, and they're going to say, well, what is this? Why is this in red, for example? You can explain. This wasn't in the original Constitution. This is an idea that we put in here to help create greater accountability. I think you're going to create a dialogue with people that's going to help your recruiting. Now, Ernest, I don't know if you agree with that, but that would be my suggestion.
I think that is an absolute wonderful suggestion, Scott. And Warren, please take that to heart. And yeah, it is something that you have to be able to wrap your mind around. In direct telephone conversation, I had thousands and thousands of conversations months before the information was even released, just lining people up to be ready to see all this information and be able to disseminate it with an open mind. And I had these conversations. Really, all I was asking people to commit to would be the fact that if it's everything that I tell you, is this something you could support? And also, I would get the Warren. I've talked about it live on the air before. That the one thing really stands out in my mind. I went through this conversation with this gentleman, and he was a veteran. He was still actually active duty. And he said, "Man, this is so amazing and so fantastic." He got it, and some people do. Some people get it really quickly, and they understand that we are not messing with the Constitution. We are putting things in there to restrict the federal government, return the federal government back to where they're supposed to be, where the framers intended. Now, as I explained to him, and I think I used this example with you, Scott, that if you can show someone that following the plan of the LRC and supporting the People's Constitution for America is, in fact, the ultimate defense of the Constitution against the domestic enemies, and that we wouldn't even be having this conversation if both parts of that oath to protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that the domestic standpoint, that really hadn't been done. But this plan of the LRC is the ultimate defense of it. Well, he got excited and gathered around a dozen or so of his friends, some active, some inactive, and he asked, could they all, be there to ask me questions? And we set this up, and this one guy spoke out. Boom! He's like, no, and all this other stuff. And I said, okay, why? And well, I took his oath, blah, 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 blah. I said, okay, will you do me the courtesy of listening to me? And the guy said, sure, I will. Now, afterwards, they told me that this guy, as soon as it was brought up, in the light that it was brought up, he leaned back in his chair, folded both arms across his chest, and said, And then he got loud or verbal. They had it on speakerphone, and I could actually hear this rather loud objection. And we talked and talked and talked. But as I talked and explained, and I went back and I covered some ground, and I let him ask questions, I let him interrupt me, let him do whatever he wanted to do, that eventually he uncrossed his arms, and he started leaning forward a little bit, listening a little bit closer. And by the time we got through, I said, now, sir,
did that satisfy your objections? And he says, oh, hell yes, I'm on board, and I'm going to get you 100 more. So, yeah, it's almost a chess game. It's almost a chess game. But I had thousands of these conversations with people. And Scott, I know we brought you on the show, we gave you an opportunity, and then also we've been shoving the LRC at you, and you hadn't had a chance to actually disseminate it yet. But I would love to have you back after you've had a chance to do so. And I'd also be able to continue to collaborate, even behind the scenes, not in front of a broadcast audience, which I just pray to God is in the hundreds of thousands of people, because this is the kind of message that needs to be shared. But Warren, I hope that answered your question. I think it's wonderful advice. And Scott, thank you so much for that insight. And yeah, buddy, we do need to pick your brain, but we don't want to take you away from your principal goal. I understand that, but we're willing to get in there and unite and fight, promote you, support you every way possible. And we do have chapters all across the country, buddy. I promise you, the numbers are there, but the people are still like, what do we do? What do we do? Go ahead, Jeremy.
Well, I think there's something else, and I'm just going to kind of follow on this, and I don't know, Warren, if you're still online or not, but here's something I think it's important to realize, too, is that we talk about the Constitution, and we talk about the Bill of Rights, and we talk about the Declaration of Independence, and it's amazing how the percentages of Americans have never read that document. So when you start to talk about changing something, when people only know the principle of concept of it and they've never read it, it's actually a shock to them because it's
okay. I'm gonna put you on the spot, Scott. You ready? I bet you can handle this. But I'm putting you on the spot. There are five liberties, five of them, in the First Amendment to the Constitution alone, which, by the way, in the People's Constitution is Article 1, Section 1. But there are five liberties there. Without cheating, can you name those five liberties that exist just in the First Amendment?
In the First Amendment?
Just in the First Amendment, there's five liberties.
I'm not going to
unalienable rights.
Well,
only 2% of the people in this country can answer this question. If that eases you a little bit there.
I'm going to say freedom of expression and freedom of religion and freedom of assembly. And I think that's freedom of the press. Isn't that correct? At least that's four. I think that's. I don't know if I have I'm going to slip on the fifth one.
Okay, here we go. In order, and less than 1% of the people can do it in order. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, the right to peaceably assemble, and the right to have your grievances redressed by the federal government. And freedom of religion goes first because it was the most important. That's why we took the Bill of Rights. In the People's Constitution for America, the first thing you're going to see is that, man, they moved some things around. Yeah, we put the rights of the people and the states first. The most important things first in a contract or compact. What could be more important than the rights of the people and the rights of the states? And you're right. People object to the concept of it without knowing the content even of the original documents. Mr. Deeter.
I always like to ask people, where were you when they subverted the Constitution? Where was your vigilantism then? Because you don't have a constitutional republic now. So if you don't want your Constitution touched, either you realize it's too late and you didn't stand, or you're just now finding this out. Anyway, that's my take on it anyway. Of course,
Jeremy is our resident smartass, and he does it well. He really does.
I hold that title proudly as well. Lisa wants to come on, and before we have her on, 25 minutes ago, Reuters had breaking news, said that there's been an explosion in Manhattan. And if you look on the website, there's people saying huge explosion in Manhattan, bomb in a trash can in Chelsea, Manhattan IED explosion, West 23rd Street and 7th Ave. There's a heavy police presence and fire presence right now. They said it was so strong it shook the entire neighborhood and everybody is on the street. And that was about 24 minutes ago. So I wanted to let everybody know what was going on. That came across my feed. And I know Lisa also had a really good question for you as well, Scott. So let's Lisa, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent.
Hello there, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I wanted to ask you, since you gave us how much time we would have if Hillary was elected, I was wondering what what your thoughts are about that if Trump is elected. Because we all know that, the presidency is an important office, but it is not the end all of what happens in our country on a daily basis. And you've referenced to, being more aware of what's going on in your towns, even school teachers, things like that. Also, and that was one question, so what if Trump is elected? How much time do we have to try to fix things? And then the other question was, what would our founders do if they were here? What would you say?
I think if our founders were here, they'd probably start redrafting something new down here, and they'd look at Philadelphia and probably decide it was a sanctuary city and have to find another city to start this whole thing over. That's the first thing. The country's in a mess. The values that we've moved from have moved way off base, but there's something really amazing about change. So when I talk about Hillary, it's a process that when we talk about that 120 days, it's based on the principles of using all of the mechanisms that they've spent years putting in place and now pulling the trigger and pulling all those pieces together to where the momentum is already ready to be triggered. It just needs her and her following to seal the deal. Her election, well, at the first 120 days with the executive orders process, she'll go. We'll have a Congress that will try to feint being resistant, but it won't. It'll collapse. And she'll basically gain control and run, and then the country will be quickly disseminated in about 120 days, but the realization of that will take 4 years or so. That's my assessment. With Trump, one of the amazing things is that and I'm going to read into your question a little differently, because I don't see it as how much time. I'm going to see how much time, what does it do to our clock for saving the country, rather than saying how much time we have. And all of this is going to be something that Ernest has said a minute ago, and it's something that I am a huge believer in, and it's something why I said earlier why Kilroy is not going away at the end of the political cycle. If we end up with a President Trump, there are 2 aspects that have to be maintained in order to see success for the Republic. One is support for him, and one is pressure on him for accountability, and that's coming from the people. There is no question that the people that are around him are ready to execute change. The problem is that as you try to get into those circles, and you said it yourself, the presidency has a limited amount of scope that it can handle. But if the president knows that it has the people behind him willing to pressure Congress, willing to remove congressional people from office, willing to make the stand and say no or yes as need be, and let that momentum that he's pulled together with thousands of people in his rally, then the change of bringing this country back can happen relatively quickly. On one level, you'll see rapid change within the course of his term. If he was successful and things were going, and we continued on that path to a second term, you could literally see this country pull back radically towards the directions we wanted it to go. But in the overall scope of things, putting ourselves back on path is going to take a long time. And it's going to take vigilance, and it's going to take determination by the people, and not to be short-sighted and not to lose those goals of what we're trying to accomplish. Because it has taken years for this leftist insurgency to seed itself in. They have set up teachers with tenure, and they've set up university professors with tenure, and they have lifetime politicians. And so the efforts of the LRC, matched with a key piece of the people behind that and the people working with a President Trump, is going to be absolutely powerful. It can literally change the world. And if that happens and those efforts are combined, then I think that what you'll see and you'll feel within months of you'll start to feel the pressure of the disintegration of the Union relinquish, and you'll start to feel that the country is coming back again. And the power of hope and the power of unity and the power of people working together is an unstoppable force. If it wasn't so, then governments, the elites wouldn't worry about it so much. The last thing I'll say on this is what I tell everybody in Kilroy. On November 8th, we have an election. If whoever wins, everybody's going to take 3 days off to get their head cleared. If it's Hillary, we've got a reset. If it's a Donald Trump who's going to become a President Trump, it's a great time to celebrate. But 3 days later, we're back. And we're not back just to come back. We're back in doubling our force, because now we have to get ourselves entrenched for support and keeping mobilized and keeping focused on what the change has to be. Keep that in mind, that whatever efforts you're doing now, whether you're out reaching to people to get their vote, campaigning for somebody, whether you're trying to get people participant in this process, on November 8th, you vote. On November 9th, you celebrate or mourn, whoever your candidate is, and you take a couple days to do that, and on that fourth day, you should be back in the saddle going as hard as you ever have, because now is when that is when the real work begins, regardless of what candidate it is. With Hillary, the work begins to try to preserve what we can, or she's going to become the henchman. If it's Donald J. Trump, it is to keep people activated, mobilized, and focused, because the work is just beginning at that point in time. Those would be my comments. Does that help?
I thought for sure Ernest was going to jump in there.
Well, actually,
ahead,
I thought Lisa was going to do it. So, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, Lisa, it's all you.
Well, I hope if Trump is elected that people don't just go home and start watching Dancing with the Stars again. That's
not either. I'll tell you. The only way that's going to happen.
Hey, the only way so far.
Go ahead.
No, so far the NFL is shooting themselves in the foot. I mean, there's people boycotting them left and right. That returns some of the focus. I've made jokes before that if you want a revolution in this country, there's a couple of ways to accomplish it. One of them would be to cancel the Super Bowl the day before, and you would be amazed at the amount of people that would take to the streets over something like that. Scott, you might think this is kind of off base, but Iceland. What was Iceland able to do? Now, I know they're a much smaller country, smaller numbers, etc., but Iceland reset their country.
Yes,
and
they
the
did.
Icelandic people, I mean, they did it. They absolutely did it. They got rid of the banksters, and they got rid of all the members of the government and everything else, and these people are on the right course now. And, I mean, to me, that was just total, just a shot in the arm, so to speak. But, how hard has the media been? How hard is it? You have to almost have heard about it or be aware of it or be active to even know that it happened in this country.
Well, there is one thing I would say, and this is I think it's important, and it's to encourage people to disconnect from the mainstream media and give them key sources. And I'm going to pitch Matt Drudge right here, and I'm going to do so because I find the Drudge Report, which is a news aggregator, it's not a news writing service, to be one of the greatest places to go and get a picture and optic of what's going on. Matt Drudge is a headline writer. He's a brilliant headline writer. But more importantly is he's bringing in a composite of stories every day that if you track it, you're able to put together a picture, and it doesn't take long to do. And if you take a little time to do that, rather than sitting down in front of the TV to hear somebody tell you what the news is, read it and engage and think about it yourself. That's going to be one of the big pieces that will help in this post-era. The thing about Iceland, which is amazing, is they did reset their country. And one of the great things that I'm going to credit, and while I am a Trump supporter, I'm looking at this realistically. And I know that he's going to be a single man going into a hostile Washington, D.C., and there's going to be limits of what he can actually do. But here's something that I think is to his credit, and it's something I've been amazingly impressed with. I have a pretty solid background in economics. I have a lot of study in the area of social economics. And I've been listening to a lot to Facebook live streaming from people making comments about their support, and it's a whole range of diversity. Every aspect of our culture that's doing this and providing support. One of the most amazing things that strikes me, and why this links me with Iceland, is that he has educated people during this process and educated them about economics, about the aspects of what the importance of GDP is and debt is and taxation is and what it means to put more money back in people's pockets. This is microeconomics tied to a macro scale, but what's amazing is he's created simple messages for people to grasp onto and to really start to appreciate that it is economics in the end of the day. And what's important about that is that awareness in the public is massively increased. And with that, it is critical that people keep that focus, because ultimately, one of the things that he's fighting against, if you really look at it, and is that this is important to keep in mind. We're seeing the same type of fight that happened with Teddy Roosevelt at the beginning of the 1900s. And it was the fight against the capitalists, the tangible asset owners. Trump is a tangible asset owner. He owns property. And he's fighting against the bankster robber barons. And he's fighting against the tech virtual concept traders and IP traders. These are important differences. And when you're getting somebody who's tied to actual assets, that owns assets in the United States, his value is in people and in places. It's not in how much money you can rake off of every single transaction. So ultimately, he's going to need the support of the people if we want to accomplish what Iceland did, to be able to make the actions to put those people in jail. Those bankers that raked off the public in 2008, they got away with nothing. They got away scot-free and bonuses from the government. Those are the sorts of people that now have to be held accountable to start correcting this machine. And the only way he's going to be able to do that is if people stay active and support him.
Well said, sir. Well said. Just like everything else that's rolled off your tongue. Look, I don't know how much time you need, whether you need a week, 2 weeks, a day or two, what kind of time you need, or if you want to come back as early as tomorrow night, because we do these shows just on Saturday, Sunday night, and we found out that we've seen that seems to be the right time to do these, even on the West Coast, as that people are tuning in more and more each week to these. But I don't know how much time you need, but you tell me or we'll touch base, and as soon as you've had a chance to look over everything, man, I would certainly appreciate a shout from you. You've got my number, and I'm spreading your number around as well, so you'll be getting calls from all sorts of people to further help you get your message out. And look, Scott, man, our deepest appreciation and admiration. Really and truly, you're a great American, sir, and we appreciate you.
Well, I tell you, I really appreciate being on the show tonight. I think that if we waited about a week, it'd be great. We're going to have a whole new store coming up with a little bit of our own touch on this deplorables thing. We're calling it the Deplorables Store. We want Americans. We're going to own that title proudly. I'm going to tell you right now, and all of us will. And we want to add our component to that with some of our flair of what that deplorables means to us. So I think if we wait about a week, we can talk a little bit about that on the next show, but it'll give me some time to go through the People's Constitution, which sounds like just an amazing document. I'm looking forward to going through it. And I think we'll have some conversations on the backside, Ernest, and we can start talking about how we can also bring our efforts together to really move this thing forward.
Amen. Amen. Praise the Lord. Let's see, Mr. Deeter, we've only got 2 or 3 minutes left. Scott, man, any final words? Let me give it to you first, sir. You've been our guest and esteemed guest and humble guest all at the same time, and I appreciate that. Take another minute or two, sir. Anything? Let's remind everybody of your website, your Facebook page, your Twitter handles, things such as this, and let's stay in close touch.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again. It's Kilroy Rising, which is a political PAC and support. It's a special operations political PAC designed to be for the people, because that's what we're here for, to help drive the vote and to help preserve the republic. We've endorsed Donald J. Trump because he is, in our opinion, the best course of action going forward to help preserve the republic. And we need that right now because this is not a normal election. What we're facing is something very different in our history. It's an insurgency from the outside trying to destroy our country from within. So if you go to KilroyRising.com, you can find out information on that site. We're also on Twitter at Kilroy Rising, and we're also on Facebook at Kilroy Rising PAC. Really want to thank you for being on tonight. The last thing I'd say to everybody is, you have to vote. Don't sit around. Don't be disengaged on this. In my opinion right now, that anybody that decides not to vote, you just voted for Hillary and you're not on my friend list anymore. And I don't mean that.
Amen.
You need to vote. And if you don't like Donald Trump, suck it up and move forward.
There we go. Hey, look, I'm gonna end with my little parting phrase, 2 of them. Remember and learn this. Take it deep into your soul. The power of the people is so much greater than the people in power. And with that in mind, I'm going to let Jeremy take us home after I say, ride hard, ride hard, love strong, live and die free. Mr. Deeter.
Yeah, we appreciate everyone being here tonight with the Liberty Restoration Information Show. We'll be back tomorrow night as well from 8 to 10 Eastern Time. And hopefully you guys can join us. If you've enjoyed what you heard tonight, if you enjoyed listening to our guest, then give us a share. Let people know that we're out there. This has been Ernest Lee, Jeremy Deeter, Lisa, our fearless producer, and our guest tonight, who we are humbled and honored to have with us, is the president and founder of Kilroy Rising, the Political Action Committee, Scott Kesterson. And we hope to hear from him again here very soon. Thanks again for everybody being here. This is what revolution sounds like. It is what resistance sounds like, because right now we need liberty, and this is what it sounds like to fight for reason. So Thanks for being here. We appreciate it. We appreciate your time, and we will see you tomorrow night.
Sons, as I write you this letter, days past and days yet to come, and the message of freedom, the message of freedom. I stand at the edge of the pages of history, and lessons unlearned. It feels like these pages are remaining unturned, but boys, it's no mystery. Children, I'm sorry to leave you this world in a state of disaster. It was given to me in a similar state, but I woke up so late in the game, now it's spiraling faster. 'Cause freedom's the answer, so what is the question? Resist the advances of force and aggression, and leave to your children the promise of something more. 'Cause God is my witness, I'll be a slave no more. Boys, listen close, for our souls may depend on the actions we take and the causes we choose to defend. So treat every man as a friend, and live your own lives in their divine processions, and transform your world with your selfless expressions. Reach out your hand, in time we'll understand. Children, one day I'll be gone, and you'll have to remember these words and be strong as you cling to each other, your family, your faith, and your father's song. You've known this all along. Well, freedom's the answer, so what is the question? Resist the advances of force and aggression, and leave to your children the promise of something more. If God is my witness, I'll be a slave no more. The message of freedom endured every tyrant or second-rate despot the world's ever known, and for one simple reason, the people have kept it alive. And with no end in sight to the level of violence that men in high places will seek for to silence the will of the people, in you it must survive. For freedom's the answer, so what is the question? Resist the advances of force and aggression, and leave to your children the promise of something more. If God is my witness, I'll be a slave no more. Well, freedom's the answer, so what is the question? Resist the advances of force and aggression, and leave to your children the promise of something more. If God is my witness, I'll be afraid no more. Life so dear, but peace so sweet, to be purchased with chains from our necks to our feet. Forbid this, Lord, I know not what is left. Give me liberty, or give me death.
When I listen to Audible, I'm not flying to my third sales meeting this month. I'm on a romantic date with my vampire boyfriend.